Hey, folks. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. Andre, let's get you in here. And I see David in the audience as well. Let me see. All right, David, I just invited you up. You should see a notification in your app. Just accept that, and you should be able to come right up.
I'm here.
There you are. Welcome. First X Space for you?
Yeah, actually, yes. This is the first one. Glad to be here.
Wow. All right. We're doing it live. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from beautiful, sunny Flagler Beach, Florida.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Not too far from me in Puerto Rico. Um, yeah, that's great. I'm glad we got to have you on today. I know we met at NamesCon. It was good to meet a bunch of South Florida domainers there. And yeah, I've been going over some of your past interviews and wrapping my head around you and your brother's business here. Um, and looks like great attendance today. So the people are very keen to learn from you and hear about your experiences.
Thank you. I've got a lot of exciting news I'm going to share for the first time here, which can't wait to talk about.
Yeah, well, that's great. Before we get into that, you want to just give us well, let's also introduce Andre here. Andre is my co-host, and he's a veteran domainer as well. Uh, Welcome, Andre.
Hey, welcome, David. I'm glad to have you on. I spent a fair bit of time reading your contributions since you've become vocal again in the domain industry. Like last time I remember you being vocal was back in the day of blogs when there was kind of this insider joke and people would confuse your last name with Costello and as in Abbott and then Costello and then you would reply it's Castello Punk. That was
Yeah, it's the Italian version. Costello is Irish,
yep.
as is Castillo is Spanish. As you know, in Puerto Rico, it's Castillo.
No kidding. Well, good that we differentiate here. David, you want to just like give the audience a whirlwind tour of your background, who you are, and why everyone knows your name?
Well, I started off, I've actually was a writer first. I was going to major in journalism with a minor in history. I was a junior archaeologist at 12 years old, excavating Indian mounds in Florida. Yeah, I was definitely a weird kid. And my brother and I had a band. We left Florida, played CBGB, then we went to California, played the Whiskey and the Roxy, and I also started promoting shows there. And that's when I realized if I believed in something, I had a knack for promotion because I still hold the attendance record as a promoter for both of those clubs in Los Angeles to this day. And Michael got into digital recording. He was producing a gospel show with, he's a Hall of Famer, Walt Baby Love. And Michael got in using digital and that segued him into the internet. And meanwhile, I was off doing something else, and I heard Michael was doing this. I really didn't know what it was, and I came to Florida in 1997 in Boynton Beach, where we grew up. Michael and I were born in the Bronx in New York City, but we actually moved at a very young age, 2 and 3. So we basically grew up in South Florida, surfing and scuba diving, and living a very culturally different life than we would have in New York. And our late mother, who is always a fantastic inventor and entrepreneur, she goes, I think your brother Michael has something with these domain names. And I didn't know what they were, and he was basically getting them for free. And about that time, um, they had started to charge for them and people were dropping these names. And I'm like, well, I didn't know if they meant anything. And then he sold Director. I think it was director.com, which for now would be giving it away. But back then it was unheard of. I mean, for like $16,000, I think, something like that. And that kind of got my attention. And my mother said, well, can you look into it? And I said, okay, let me have some fun. So I saw he had BoyntonBeach.com, our hometown, which the site's still up. And I said, our mother had run for mayor. Everybody knew our families. I said, let me go out there and see, just, I learned a long time ago that it's the public who matters. And I'm really going to get back to this as far as the value of domains. The public is the 800-pound gorilla. You always start off with a bubble, with a niche bunch of power players and buyers and sellers. But once the public gets involved, it explodes. So I knew to go to the public. And I went out there and I talked to people. And back then I said, I'll put you on the site for $100, your hotel or restaurant, and I'll put up a little splash page. That's what I called it. I used to call it a HTB, high traffic billboard. And when I was there visiting, I did this for a couple months and I realized something. Our boyntonbeach.com was getting more traffic than these businesses' websites, which they had paid, 5,000, 6,000 back then was a lot of money, for these people. And I noticed we were getting all the traffic, and I said, well, wait a minute. If we own boyntonbeach.com, does that mean we own the brand? Now, we also own westpalmbeach.com, and I went up and spoke to the city of West Palm Beach, and they had these people, a name I'd never heard of, called webmasters, and they all sat in at the meeting. And I said, why don't you own westpalmbeach.com? Because back then you were given a name. The cities were given ci.westpalmbeach.fl.us. And I said, why didn't you get westpalmbeach.com? And the head webmaster said, well, the name doesn't matter. Now, that stopped me in my tracks because I'm a branding guy. The name means everything. Always has, always will. I don't care what technology comes into play. The name, your brand will always have value and always matter. And at that moment, I got really excited. I also noticed that all these companies were relying on these young webmasters who, while technically proficient, knew absolutely nothing about sales and marketing. And as a history writer, I went, oh my God, this is the next chapter after radio, television, cable. It's going to be the internet. So I said to Michael, which of your names is doing the most traffic? Because back then you had Excite, InfoSeek. There was no Google. He goes, oh, Palm Springs. I go, way out in California in the desert, golf, old people? I said, that's your best name? He goes, yeah. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give it a shot, invest 6 months of my time. My parents really wanted Michael and I to work together again, and we had great parents. They both have passed since then, but they were just the perfect parents who always supported us. Hopped in my T-Bird, drove out there in 3 days, and I got this apartment, and I'm like, what am I going to do? Let me just go out there. Well, first I talked to local media, and they didn't get it, and I said, okay, let me just walk around and socialize and go to bars and walk into restaurants, and I started to get a feel for it. And PalmSprings.com took off so fast. And the reason I got away with it is I was out there going into the summer. And if you know, summers in Palm Springs are brutal. And that's when traditional media goes away. So over the summer, I signed over 100 businesses. So by the time they came back in September, they couldn't get rid of me. And it just grew and grew. I mean, I was working my tail off, but it got to the point where the front page alone was making $1 million a year. Just the front page and advertising revenue. That's profit. That's not like, oh, we grossed this much in hotel reservations. That was actually money going into our pocket. But I was working my fingers to the bone. And to be frank, I was burning out. And I did it for a while. And then it got to the point where we wanted a Palm Springs Life magazine wanted to merge with us. Michael wanted a higher dollar figure. I was willing to do an even deal. The deal fell away. And by this time, I needed to take a break. And I met Bree, who was studying music production. We formed a band together, went to East Nashville, and then we went to the UK and did really well for a while. So I got away for a while. And then after all the dust settled and that ended, I came back to Florida. Our father had passed away, but was talking to mom the whole thing, and I said, I'm not going to go back in. That was so much work. It consumed me. But what was great about it was I could see the whole industry with a new set of eyes. And I saw one thing right away. The public was not involved with domain names the way they are with stocks and bonds or buying real estate or even buying art or race horses. It doesn't matter. It was still domainers, startups, and the once in a blue moon corporate person that Andrew Miller will tell you will be their champion at a company that will get the deal done. But by and large, the public is still clueless. And I go, why is that? So I talked to people, and the only name they knew was GoDaddy. That was their doorway, was GoDaddy for the public. And I have to admit, I'm a branding guy. GoDaddy just hit the grand slam in the bottom of the ninth inning. I mean, I still to this day where I live, there's a lot of retired investors, and they said they know Michael and I do domain names, so they'll be by the campfire, smoking a cigar, drinking. We'll chat about business. And I say, what do you think of Atom? Or what do you think of Spaceship? Two fantastic companies, by the way, both cutting edge, both really doing well. They have no clue. They shrug. And I said, well, GoDaddy. And they go, oh, of course. Half of them bought the name they have from GoDaddy or whatever. So that's when I realized GoDaddy was holding the keys to the castle. And then something else happened. We had a guy who contacted me about Islanders.com. He was starting a clothing line named Islanders. He said, listen, I don't know much about domains, but I feel if I own Islanders.com, I'll own the brand and I'll make this. I can go just dominate. And I said, well, you can. And I was offering him a good price, like low six figures. The people who should buy it are the New York Islanders, but we're not going to go there. There's more sports teams than them that have been totally tone deaf about their online brands. But he agreed. He goes, it's a lot of investment for me, but I believe it. And I believe this is going to be huge. So I said, well, let's go through escrow.com because I'm still friends with them. And he called me back and he said, we can't do the deal. I go, why? He goes, well, my wife went on GoDaddy and they only appraised it for 20,000. And I went, what? I said, that's insane. He goes, well, listen, like my wife said, this David Castello sounds like a knowledgeable guy, but who are we going to believe, David or GoDaddy? And that's when I went into, you know, full blown gear. I went, oh, no, 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 no. Okay. And I started to see that how much they are such a huge brand with domain names as far as the gateway with the public that they're practically a monopoly as far as branding. Nobody else is on the public's radar, and their present system will not give a numerical appraisal to any name, for more than 25,000. Some will say too high to estimate, but those are few and far between. Because I constantly do research, so they would just say 25,000. Wednesday.com or Wednesday.com, seven-figure name. They appraised it for 23,826. This is crazy. And so I really was like, God, how am I going to take these guys on? And they actually made it very easy because I heard they were launching a site, domainnames.com, a name that was bought by Frank Schilling. And then when they acquired Uni, they acquired that name. So domainnames.com, a name has to be worth a minimum of 100,000. It can be worth 2 million, but it has to be appraised at more than 100,000. We have 7 names with them. I decided to throw my hat in the ring. I said, let's do this. I still believe in GoDaddy, the brand, and their power. I'd rather work with them than just work against them. And those 7 names, 6 of them are not all appraised under 25 grand. Well, then how were they accepted on the site? One of the names, Golf Club, it puts too high to estimate. What's ironic is that's the only 2-word name on domainnames.com. The rest are, huge names like caution.com, manicure.com, wednesday.com. These are all appraised for less than 25 grand. And guess what? We're getting tons of leads, shows the power of GoDaddy, but they're all stalling out. They're all stalling out because, of course, they're going to check the appraisal. And even though, as far as I'm concerned, we've got these names way below their fair market value because we want to get some action going. So when I went to NamesCon, I met the GoDaddy staff, wonderful people. They agreed with me. There was no conflict. So I'm thinking, well, who was behind this? And you know what? At this point, I no longer care. I'm not here to humiliate anybody. I really don't care who put this in place. But the bottom line is GoDaddy, with their power, has completely suppressed and devalued the entire domain world for years. And it's going to end because the good news is I've been contacted. They are redoing the whole system. And they said plainly, we will be appraising names into 7 figures. This is such a game changer for the industry that most domainers can't appreciate it. The rest of the world doesn't take us seriously, even though we know these are some of the best investments you can make are domain names. If a domainer sells a name for 3 times, 4 times, 5 times what they bought it for, what do? We're like, oh, cool. We shrug. You make 300, 400, 5% profit in crypto, real estate, art. Oh, that's news. So why don't they know about us? Because it's been devalued. GoDaddy's been telling them for years, no name is really worth more than 25 grand. Well, that's not going to bring the players in. So when they see a big sale, they just think it's an anomaly. And all you have to do is go to Ron Jackson's DN Journal, look at his top 100 for every year for the past 20 years. You're going to see a lot of 7 and 8 figure sales. So this is what I'm excited about. They say it'll take some time. I don't know what that means, but that the gears are in motion. And they've made some little changes. It'll no longer says 25,000 on their comps. They never had a comp more than 25,000. I kind of outed them. They had carrot.com for 25,000. I showed carrot.com sold for 600,000. And they would use those comps to give you this low appraisal. Now it'll say 25,000 plus. Cowboys.com will say 25,000 plus. Rangers.com 25,000 plus. It doesn't figure into their appraisal. but at least they're doing that. At least they're pushing it that way. I'm even seeing even more too high to estimate. But this is going to revolutionize our industry and bring in the world and bring in the public. Anything any domain is known, I don't care how far you go back, the reality is going to totally change. You're going to have major players come in, buyers, sellers. What GoDaddy was doing before was the equivalent of Zillow saying no property in America was worth more than 200,000. So you're trying to sell a house for 850K, which is not a lot anymore. And GoDaddy and Zillow saying that's worth 175. And so the guy brings you a 175 offer. There's no sale. There's no starting point. So what was a negative is now turned to a positive. The only question is when will it happen? But the incredible power that GoDaddy has, once they do this, they will do the most important thing, and they will start educating the public about fair market value with these names. And that's going to flip the script.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, whirlwind tour there. It's really puzzling that they have this feature at all, public facing inside of the search results. It really, I mean, the people who are acquiring domains for their business, maybe they need some assurances that the price that the domainer is giving them is sensible. But at any price that's like worth negotiating, upward anything above five grand, they're going to be, probably talking to one of their brokers, or doing their own research beyond that. And it should be fairly obvious, like, what the range of values and how much these domains are worth. So it really just seems to unnecessarily, like the entire premise of this being a useful feature to show in search results is kind of unfounded. Moreover, GoDaddy has an incentive to pump the sale prices of premium domains on their platform anyway, because they earn commissions on those prices. And so, they should clearly side with domainers in terms of, optimistic pricing rather than trying to anchor it too low. So it's really puzzling that they would have let this gone on for so long. My understanding is that the model that they're using to predict these prices hasn't been updated or retrained in several years, and that's likely what they'll be doing when they allude to that they'll be updating it.
Can I tell you something? That's a bunk. That's all bunk. It says it stops in March 2023. All the sales I proved that their comps were wrong were sales prior to 2023. So I don't know where they got these sales from. In fact, and this is really bad, I could not verify one of the sales. They would show 5 comps for every appraisal. I couldn't verify one comp. So I don't know what was going on here. And like I said, I don't want to keep throwing fire on it because they say that they're getting rid of it. My only question is the element of time, because this is going to drastically change our business. And let me say something else. We're getting a lot of leads from our names on domainnames.com. None have sold. And people said, well, I said, no, hold on. The difference is not only are we getting, none, they're all stalling. We're not getting one offer. Okay, when we had these names on our own landers, yeah, we get the ridiculous too low offer, whatever. We're not getting any offers, which shows me that we're getting so blown out by the price, even though it's low, compared to the GoDaddy appraisal. And that was the problem. And I mean, there was so much going on here that was so weird. It just blew me away. And the deeper I dug, the worse it got. So I really wouldn't care if Spaceship and Atom had the same power with the public, but they have no power. They can't move the needle with the public. The public doesn't even know who they are. So this is and I will still say that domainers have no idea how much this is going to change the landscape as the public gets educated by GoDaddy, because they're the only company that can do it, about real market value.
I
Yeah.
think I think if I can chime in, people are curious about something. As you mentioned, there are many good people at GoDaddy. So they're super domainer friendly. You have James, you have Paul Nix, who retired, and so on, Alan. But my question is, I don't think it's malice on their part, but rather the fact that maybe higher up, so to speak, they just don't care maybe about the domain industry as much as we would like them to. So I think people are going to be curious. What's your take on just how much GoDaddy itself, like at the higher levels, cares about domain investments, whether or not they care enough to give us the best shelf space, so to speak. So when people perform searches on GoDaddy, especially since nowadays, and how do you see that? When you have, since the new GTLDs rolled out, for example, other entities competing for the shelf space in question, like, for example, new GTLDs with premium renewals that offer, GoDaddy all sorts of preferential deals and so on and so on. So what's your take on how they perceive the domain industry, and how much shelf space in this current context they're willing to send our way, basically?
Excellent question. I don't know who is behind this because it's so egregious. It is probably the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my whole life of business, that a company with this much monopoly over an industry would purposely devalue it. And people would tell me, well, they're getting this out of it and that out of it. And when I researched those reasons, they were nonsensical from a business perspective. I think what's going to happen is, as they change the appraisals and the public begins to realize the real value, because these are the best investments out there. They're better. It's better than precious metals. It's better than real estate. It's better than crypto. Domain names are a monster. It's like the world's best kept secret right now as far as investment potential. And I think once, remember, GoDaddy gets a minimum of 15% on these sales. That can quickly add up. I mean, really add up once you start getting into higher prices, because you're going to have a lot higher sales ratio now when their appraisal matches what the seller wants. Let's say they're close. Um, I don't know who up the ladder, but money talks and everything walks. And when the money starts coming in, I think the people at higher corporate will be like, well, great, we're doing this. They already are doing it with the launch of domainnames.com, where a name has to be worth a minimum of 100K. That just the basis of that site is contrary to the whole GoDaddy appraisal system. So that's excellent. I don't know who it was. I asked around. I had some major players contact me privately and tell me they think it was this person, it was that person. I don't want to go down that road. I'm not here to humiliate or attack anyone. I just want the system changed because GoDaddy can literally set the market. The power they have is so incredible. It's I respect it. So I don't know who up the ladder, but I know once they see the money coming in, it's like anything else in corporate. As that money stream grows, you start focusing on it. Because when you're telling the world that no name is basically worth more than 25,000, you flatten the market out. And I mean, they see Icon selling, for 12 million. Well, maybe that was an exception. They can't justify it in their heads. But once corporate takes note of the money coming in, and this is going to happen. To me, it's not a question of if; it's a matter of when. I'd like to have it done right now. But and James Isles has been great. He's contacted me twice. As the new model comes out, they've asked for my input. I'm only too happy to give it. I thought it was important that Michael and I listed 7 names with domainnames.com, because that means that their interests are our interests. We're in this together. I'm not just simply on the outside attacking them. But it's good. This is going to be, once the public starts getting educated, and they'll start checking prices. They believe whatever GoDaddy tells them. They really do, and the brand is that big. So I don't
It's
know.
one piece in a broader puzzle of, this tension between catering to domainer interests versus catering to end user interests, which is obviously a balance that every registrar and marketplace needs to strike. Some other examples of this within GoDaddy are, they push upsells for your web hosting, your email, things that don't really apply to domainers, but are lucrative businesses for their end users. Similarly, things like they make a ton of money on expired domain auctions. That's pure profit for them. They also warehouse some of those names, I would imagine. They might not be allowed to do that. I forget. Don't quote me on that. But there is some tension there as well, where more or less they want nice domains to slip through the cracks so that they can auction them off and earn high profit margins versus renewing them. I'm not saying that they do anything there, but there is the tension there. And similarly, we've seen a lot of outcry over not putting premium domains as high up in search results inside of GoDaddy, and to some degree relegating them to the aftermarket tab within GoDaddy search. all of that serves selling more novel registrations to end users, which is valuable for the end users because they get into the door with a cheap domain, but it's also at the expense of domainers. So there is a balance because, at the end of the day, they're a marketplace and they earn their commission on sales volume. And so they are aligned with domainers for the most part there. But there are these tensions that are, abound across the industry. Yeah, similarly, we've seen Spaceship be very aggressive in growing, potentially now with their new owners. They may be much more focused on being much more lean and end user focused in their products and pricing and whatnot.
There, a lot of what you're saying, I agree with. I have to tell you, because that is how they've made their money traditionally. But what GoDaddy and I believe they've come to realize this is not in their best interest. Suppressing an entire market, devaluing an entire market, there is never an upside to that in the long run.
Well, but I mean, surely it had to have made sense for them if they've done it for this long. I don't think the execs at GoDaddy are that, obtuse to where they would, if it were actually being a considerable hit to their bottom line, I don't think they would have let that go on. So clearly there must be massive benefit for end users to see that valuation in the search results, which is why they've kept it there for so long.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I agree. But the reason and I agree at one time, what you're saying, it probably made sense. I don't think it's a coincidence they stopped updating in March 2023. Something must have happened where they realized this thing has got an expiration date because it was starting to work against their best interest. Like I said, there's never, no matter what other ways they make money, other money streams, there's never an advantage to devaluing a market. Never. I don't care if it's cars, horses, crypto, real estate. It doesn't matter. There's no advantage to it. And I think they started to realize that uh, after a while and realize we're not talking, I only brought up the big names because it made their appraisal look so ridiculous. I'm talking them devaluing any name north of 25K, and that's not a lot of money. And that's a big spectrum. And people will still continue to buy domain names for a lesser price, but show the real spectrum. Somebody comes to me for Wednesday.com with a $23,000 GoDaddy appraisal. There's no starting point. There's no discussion. We've just wasted each other's time. One thing I want to throw in that's interesting. There's a place called Desert European Motors in Rancho Mirage, California. Before I had my daughter, I have an SUV now. But back then, Michael would get our Jaguar convertibles there and all that. And I talked to the woman who was in charge of Rolls Royce because they're the number one Rolls Royce dealer in America. And I said, "Who buys a Rolls Royce?" I said, "You have average Joes come in and buy a Rolls Royce?" And she goes, "Yeah, you'd be surprised." And I said, well, how does that work? And she goes, "Well, when they walk in here, they know it's a Rolls Royce. So there's no sticker shock." And that always stayed in my head. And I'll tell you what's going to happen when we know this thing has turned around is when it gets to the point where I don't care if it's an intern, I don't care if it's a secretary, I don't care if it's a corporate administrative assistant. Then when somebody mentions, "Oh, I'm thinking about buying a one-word generic.com," that all of them go, "Yeah, that's got to be worth like mid six figures." When it gets to that point, we'll know the public's been educated. Doesn't mean they're going to spend that much. They may go cheaper, but at least they know the real fair market value of names. Because right now it's just, it's loony land. I want to do say that Adam.com has the best online appraisal system. It's not good for multiple words, but let's look at Blockbuster AI, the auction. Now the auction didn't go through at the end because there was an ownership problem, but during the auction, and that auction for blockchain.ai closed at 405,000. During the auction, right on the page, it had an Esteban appraisal of $660 and a GoDaddy appraisal of about $3,600. Both were a joke. And I was like, why is that even on there? And still, it went that high. And I was thinking it probably would have gone higher if the appraisal was more realistic. And just to let you know, Adam.com appraised that name at 224K, which is realistic. And I'm just looking at this like, no wonder people think we're a joke. Real investors think domains are a joke when actually domain names are the best investment on the planet. And the only person who can change that perception, and they're going to do it, is GoDaddy. So that's what I'm excited about. And it's just a matter of time. James.
So
been great.
What other appraisal tools do you like? And then, take us through any sort of testy negotiations where you needed to hammer out an appraisal or work out for yourself, when you're pricing, especially high-end names, how do you gain the confidence to be able to price something and really commit to a number?
Oh, good, excellent question. The people that we've sold our names to have all been self-educated about the market, so they're immune to the appraisal system. For one-word domains, I like Adam, I like Saw. Both of them are good. They're not good for two-word domains, and maybe that's where GoDaddy can come in with all their power and create a better system. But for one-word domains, they're actually, fairly accurate. Nothing's perfect, but if somebody came to me with an appraisal from Saw or Adam for one of our names, we'd have a starting point to enter negotiations. When somebody's coming to you with no number over 25K, it's a joke. So the names we've had, and like I said, we've lost some because of GoDaddy. Islanders was the example I gave with the clothing line. The only online appraisal the public trusts, and that's really where all the money is, and all the gazillion sales that we can't even appreciate right now. They will only respect the GoDaddy appraisal, and I'm not going to use it because most of our names are over 25K. So it's the people that we've sold to. They have been self-educated. Like the gentleman who bought whiskey.com for 3.1 million. He owned whiskey.de, the German CCTLD, and he was competing with whiskey.fr, and he already knew the market. He didn't need anybody to tell him what whiskey.com. He wanted to blow whiskey.fr out of the market, take over globally, which he's done. He's doing great, but he already knew. It was just a matter of price. So the people that we've sold to, they're pretty much self-educated, and Andrew Miller and Andrew Rossen will tell you their sales pretty much go to people that are self-educated. They've done they're savvy people, and they've done their research. And but that's the real big money is if you engage the public. I mean, the public. That's you bring them in, and it's like looking at an iceberg right now. The present domain market is at 10% above the water. That 90% below is the public. And I came to the realization, when I did my research, that the only person who could do it was GoDaddy. Nobody else has that power. And the only person that could suppress it, which they were doing, was GoDaddy. So, like I said, James has contacted me a couple times now. They're moving forward, and as they bring the new model out, they want my input, which I'm only too happy to give. But I do want to stress with everyone listening, they have no idea how much this is going to change our reality. Our reality right now is based on a very narrow slice of the pie.
Yeah. Andre, any input there on, high-end valuations? And for everyone listening, feel free to raise your hand if you want to come up and ask a question, or just drop the question in the comments, and we'll be sure to ask.
Well, since I'm a volume guy, I was curious if David could let us know what he thinks, kind of from a game theory perspective, of incentives when it comes to GoDaddy. Especially since these new GTLDs started coming out, and with these premium pricing models and whatnot, and with so much competition as to who will quote unquote bribe GoDaddy more with a better deal for the shelf space I've mentioned previously. Do you think part of this reason could be kind of like some volume mathematics that GoDaddy have done? Like, for example, yeah, we could sell a domain for $1 million and make $150,000 commission, let's say. But what if for every $1 million domain we sell, we could sell 5 premium new GTLDs with premium pricing, and we make $5,000 a year each indefinitely on them, or maybe not 5, maybe 10, 15, and so on. So kind of, do you think this might have played a role, kind of the competition that these premium domains would have in terms of shelf space, and they're kind of them kind of saying, what if we're better off just playing the volume game and moving more of these premium new GTLDs or whatever else they can move with that shelf space, rather than giving so much, rather than focusing on more of outlier sales, these one-word.coms and so on.
Yeah, I think at one time that was GoDaddy's model. And like I said, they would not have launched domainnames.com unless they felt it was in their best interest to promote these UPMs and start grabbing a piece of that market. I don't think GoDaddy even knows how much this is going to blow up. I really believe they don't. Now, the staff I've talked to and at NamesCon, they get it. They understand because they're on the front lines. These guys are on the front lines with the public. But like I said, devaluing a market, there is no upside and there's a gazillion downsides. So as this thing takes off, and I mean, the people are going to benefit the most is GoDaddy because they have the power, which made no sense. All GoDaddy did by doing this dopey 25,000 max was open the door for Spaceship and Adam to move in. And they did. And they're going to. And that's why GoDaddy is like, hey, you guys got to get down to reality because Adam and Spaceship are very firmly rooted in reality and they're starting to grow. I mean, I remember in 2007, the Hyatt in New York, I was speaking and I got in an argument with Yahoo because I felt their humans do it better. I felt that was a bunch of malarkey. Okay. I knew some of those editors, they had it out for certain websites, they wouldn't rank them. We really got into it. And I said, look, I remember at one time Yahoo was a monster. A lot of people today don't remember how big they were when it came to search, and they wouldn't change. And Google came in and slaughtered them because Google's system made sense. It was more fair. It was more realistic. And I want to capitalize on the word realistic because that's what sells the public. When you're never putting a price over 25,000 on any name, whether it's sold for 50,000 or 5 million, you're not dealing with reality, and that's never attractive, and it doesn't bring the real players in. And yes, yes, for a while I agree with you. Their business model of let's do volume, let's do this, probably worked for them, but they wouldn't have launched domainnames.com. To me, that was the flare. That was the flare up in the sky when they went with that, which is totally contrary to their whole appraisal system right now. I mean, they're not suicidal, but when a name has to be valued no less than 100,000, and GoDaddy is not appraising anything for more than 25,000, you've got an issue here. So, like I said, they've contacted me. When they tell me they're going to be appraising names up in the seven figures, hallelujah, we should all celebrate. They did make it clear they want to get it right. And there's a time element. That's my only concern. But there's nothing you can do. They're a big company, like a big ship. They turn slowly, but when they turn, it's deliberate. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how soon. And my position is the sooner the better. But getting back to your original question, yes, that's how they were making money. They were doing that. But now with the launch of domainnames.com, they launched something that's going to grow and it's going to grow into a giant tree. There's no turning around now. There's no going back.
You guys,
So it's
it would be informative to think about the business here when you're thinking about this question of is it volume versus value per domain. But if you look at GoDaddy's revenue, obviously a lot of it comes from registration fees. So renewals count. You can contribute that towards recurring revenue, which is more stable. It's more valuable in a financial sense. And the number of marginal registrations that you get creates much more surface area for upsells, things like hosting and website builder and their Arrow marketing tools and all of these other upsells. And so if a majority of your business comes from these add-ons that are tied to the number of domains under management that you have, then clearly your largest incentive is going to be to grow that number of domains under management rather than to try to score the one-off, high-end
but it's
sale.
not a one-off. See, you're living in the past. I'm sorry, you're talking in the past. It was a one-off the way they're set up. Listen, one thing we can all agree on as domainers, your domain name is your online address, and we know how important that is to a business. You know who doesn't know that? The world. You know who doesn't know how valuable that is? The world. You get the world involved, it changes the business model. Now, all the things you're talking about, they're going to keep doing. Okay, but everything you're saying is like, well, they have the one off. It's a one off is the way it's set up. What happens when they start selling a lot of these names, a lot of these premium names, because the public now knows the value. Investors are coming in and saying, well, that's a $50,000 name. Maybe I can flip it for 150. It opens it totally up once they stop suppressing and devaluing the market. So yeah, people are saying, well, if they're going to sell one big name once in a while, nobody's talking about that. We're talking about them educating the public about fair market value and bringing in the public who is not involved right now. The public, by and far, does not understand how your domain name is your brand, and without it, you're just floating out there in a sea of anonymity. And
Yeah.
this is the thing. Everything you're saying is correct, but in a past tense. And like I said, I believe in my heart that GoDaddy knows that that model is no longer in their best interests, or they never would have launched domainnames.com. That wasn't just launched as some boutique site for giggles. They're realizing they've got it actually gives, here's the thing, and I just thought of this. It actually gives them an excuse to change their appraisal system because they're not compatible. An appraisal system that won't give a numerical value over 25K is working against the site where you need to be worth a minimum of 100,000 to list. So maybe they did that on purpose. I don't know. I
I
don't
think
know.
yeah. Well, I mean, time will tell. We'll see how drastic the change is once it gets rolled out. But I appreciate you making some noise. I'm sure everyone here does. But we do have to give them some credit. At the helm of a $17 billion company, you have to assume they'll be quite rational and would have caught this if it were truly in their best interests beforehand. Now, you mentioned domainnames.com. I'm curious to hear from your perspective, from the inside out. How are your experiences there? You also mentioned like lack of a sticker shock when you go into the premium car dealership.
Hmm.
This is a great analog for that. How has your experience been there? Are you optimistic? Do you think this is like an Atom copycat? What are your expectations of domainnames.com?
I love domainnames.com and I love the team behind it. I totally believe in them 100%. However, they're being handicapped by this appraisal system. We are getting a lot of leads. I'll be the first to tell you, it shows the power of GoDaddy, but then you'll see qualifying, it goes right to stall without even an offer. See, that's the red flag. Everybody knows that you get a gazillion leads before you sell a name, but when you don't see even an offer for the last 100 queries, no, no, no. Now there's a problem. It means they're getting stunned. That they're getting stunned because that, like when I talked to the guy about Islanders.com, he had barely convinced himself that he needed this name for his clothing line. He just, if anybody's been in sales, you'll know that sometimes it hangs by a thread. And the moment his wife went to GoDaddy, because that's the name they trust, and saw they only valued it at 20K, the deal was dead. Do not resuscitate. It was dead. So yes, I believe in domainnames.com. I believe in the staff. I love the concept. I love the look. And the fact that GoDaddy is now promoting UPMs and the site is only dedicated to UPMs, that blows my mind. This was unimaginable 2 years ago. So I'm thrilled. I mean, as much as you're hearing me criticize GoDaddy, and for good reason, I'm a huge fan of their brand. And yes, I didn't know they were worth 17 billion. I had to look it up. I was like, how much actually are they worth? I'm like, oh my God, these guys,
Yeah.
this is huge.
So
But
you're seeing net improvements in leads for the
oh,
domains that you've moved there.
oh God, oh
Why
my
do you
God.
think that is?
Because of GoDaddy's reach. Everybody knows it's their reach. It's why people, put up with some of their shenanigans sometimes they don't like. But
Do you
GoDaddy,
think domainnames.com is well understood amongst startups, amongst, premium companies, or do you think that's more just outbound effort on GoDaddy's part?
I think it's a mixture of everything. Let's not forget, it only started October 15th. It's just barely off the launch pad. It's not even in orbit yet. But when you look at the reasons for them launching that site, it tells me a lot about GoDaddy's mentality. They didn't just do this as an experiment. They've got some great names on there, and GoDaddy has done half of it right. They're now getting these UPMs in front of people around the world. However, their appraisal's killing it. It's killing it because I can check the traffic. I've gone in, and you see people are checking the appraisal. So that's how I know the appraisals are killing it, because we're getting the leads, but we're not even getting a minimal offer because they're being so blown out and by our price, which by the way is way below what a lot of domainers I know that can be like, oh God, Castello Brothers sold that cheap. To these people that are looking at GoDaddy appraisals, our prices are way too high because that's what they're used to seeing. So there's going to be a curve, a learning curve that I am most excited about with the public. And when I really got on the saddle is I realized, as much as I admire Adam and Spaceship, and I do admire both of those companies and the people behind them a great deal, I realized they're powerless with the general public. They're powerless. They can't move the needle. They can't educate anyone. Just walk into any public setting. Anybody listening to me right now, say, "What do you think of Adam and Spaceship?" And I'll be like, "Huh?" Say, "Anybody here a GoDaddy?" And everybody there will raise their hand. That's branding power on a scale that's almost unimaginable to a lot of people. So I do believe in the site. I believe in the people behind it. And I feel that as soon as they change the appraisal system to match fair market value, you're going to see conversions start to happen. GoDaddy's going to notice the needle moving on revenue, and they do what every corporation does. They focus on it. That's what corporations do. There's no emotion. Whatever the money's coming in, we focus on. That's why everything you're saying about how their business model was before, you're 100% right. But as it starts to change, and I've had people say, well, they sold big names once in a while. Well, why is it once in a while? It's not because the names aren't worth it, because the public doesn't know. And I'm only talking about names north of 25K. I'm not talking about all big names. So it's exciting. Where people who've been in this business will look at this in the future as a very historic turning point, where we left the bubble and we attracted the public, the big players, the people that now see domains as the same as crypto or real estate or investing in art. We don't have those people right now.
You mentioned, following the money, and I do agree that if they really roll out a system that's going to be at least reasonable, then they're going to see better results than they expect, and they're going to be happy with them. I want to keep the discussion a bit in the realm of money and numbers. You mentioned 17 billion. I'm taking a look at some numbers right now, and while GoDaddy don't mention how much of their revenue comes from Afternic, they do label everything as aftermarket revenue. So based on what I can see, aftermarket revenue is about 10% of their total revenue. And aftermarket revenue basically means Afternic, so sales that they get a commission on. It means expired auctions, so GoDaddy selling to mostly domainers, and it also means kind of investor to investor sales. Combined, they currently amount to about 10% of GoDaddy's yearly revenue.
I'm
Let's
shocked it's that
assume,
high. I'm shocked it's that high.
yeah, I do think it can go much higher, but like let's play out your best case scenario. Let's say where they actually roll it out properly and kind of end users are better educated and so on. Like, what do you think the impact of something like this would be to their bottom line? Like,
That's a great question. That's a great question, and I'll tell you the simplest way to know. Somebody, and maybe you guys can do it. Go outside the domain industry, where there's 100 investors in a room, and hand them all a piece of paper and tell them to check out in order which of these areas would they invest in. You can put crypto, you can put precious metals, you can put real estate, put domain names, put like about 9 or 10, and watch how nobody picks domain names. We're not even touching one fraction of a percent of the revenue that can be pulled in because the public doesn't believe in it. They've had the biggest company telling them domain's worth more than 25 grand. Who's going to get involved in that? Nobody. Real estate can be worth millions. Crypto can be worth, you can go above 100,000 for Bitcoin. Real estate. I mean, art goes through the roof. So look at it that way, and look at then 2 years from now, putting that same form of 100 people and having 25 or 30 of them check off domain names. I can't even extrapolate how much revenue that's going to be. I mean, I know it's going to stun everybody listening right now, but I think we're all going to be shocked that once GoDaddy's new appraisal system starts telling people this is worth 238,000, this is worth 30,000, this is worth 1.5 million. Once people are educated on real market value, it's going to attract a revenue stream that I can't comprehend, and neither can really GoDaddy right now. They're used to what they're used to for the past 20 years. We all are. We all live in the bubble. But what I'm telling you, this is going to be a revolution. It's going to change the landscape as we know it, and it's going to accelerate. The moment they launch, watch every month how it's going to pick up. It's going to pick up. It's going to pick up. It's going to keep picking up for a long, long time. And people are going to say, who said the name's worth that much? GoDaddy did. Okay. That's the reaction.
David, I'm curious if you've noticed a difference in how brokers behave now that you've been working more closely with domainnames.com, or just, I mean, even at a high level, you could describe like what makes a high-end broker perform the way they do. We had Daniel on here the other week, and he's a very talented broker. It's great to hear, just from the domainer's perspective as well. What do you notice separates the best brokers from everyone else?
Well, besides the basic ability to negotiate, I would say it's contacts in the corporate industry. That's the terrain right now. That's where Andrew Miller and Andrew Rosner really, Andrew Miller's known for his 20,000 person, basic digital Rolodex, and he calls it I forget the word, not maturation, I forget what he says, but it's constantly putting it out there, and he knows a lot of these people at the highest levels, and that's really where the big fish come in. But even Andrew will tell you he's got to find that one champion at the company who gets it, and that shows how pathetic our industry is right now. One person, and some of these brand upgrades are a no brainer. The people on here listening will be like, well, of course they should have that name. Well, Andrew's dealing with the one person who gets it. The whole company should be getting it, which is going to change conversion rates. But I've noticed that the biggest players, it's their connections, it's their respect. They know one person from one business that started another business. There's a respect going back and forth. And this is besides being able to negotiate and knowing the industry and knowing branding. If you know branding and you know how to communicate and educate about branding, that's the biggest piece of the pie. But the most important is actually the length of these connections. Otherwise, you're a shot in the dark. You'd have to get lucky like we did with whiskey.com. We met a young guy. Michael and I were at a cigar bar in Toronto, and there was this young guy from Iran or Iraq, I think Iran. And his family, he goes, I know how to sell. My family has sold carpets, they've sold gems. And I'm listening. This guy wouldn't leave us alone. So Michael went back to LA, and he goes, just please give me a name. So, we had whiskey.com. There's two spellings of whiskey. We had it without the E, Whisky, which is the Scotch version, which is actually the bigger market. And Michael told him, hey, go do whiskey. And he went out there and came back with a $2 million offer in 2 weeks. I was, what? And Michael renegotiated up to 3.1 million. Okay, so that was what we call a shot in the dark. When you have consistent sellers like Andrew Miller, Andrew Rosner, Larry Fisher, these guys, they have connections, they know people, and it comes around. They know they can be trusted when you want the really, really big brand. But it's an uphill battle for them, and it's a testament to their talent. It's a testament to their talent because they've got it really hard out there when you've got the number one company in the world and there is no number two with the public, basically suppressing the whole market and telling them nothing's really worth more than 25,000 unless we say too high to estimate. There's nothing else after that. So it's really a testament to how talented these guys are. I mean, I got to tip my hat to them. I've been in sales my whole life, and they've really done some incredible deals.
It's actually a funny problem because the more notorious you are as a sell side broker, the less attractive you become to work with for anyone on the buy side, because they know you can extract a lot of value from that negotiation. So in a way, that infamy works against you.
Well, they also can get on the name. They also know you. That's true. It's like you're going to a Rolls Royce. You're not going to negotiate them down, but you're going to walk out with a great car. There's two ways to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's I'm excited. I'm excited
You want
about what
to?
I'm doing.
Do you take part in a lot of these negotiations, or are you generally handing the reins over to a broker? Your recent sales.
Generally hand the reins over, and I'll tell you why. And Michael will agree. Yeah, when you've had a name for a long time, you tend to get emotionally attached, and emotion has no place in negotiations. I'd rather have somebody just non emotional, just straight logic, just straight business, just straight like these guys are. You really get attached to these names, and some of them you developed and had a good time with. Some of them you bought for reasons that were passionate. Mike and I are both Italian. Our ancestry is 100% Italian. We get very passionate about things, and you really can't have that in negotiating. It helped me sell advertising for PalmSprings.com because I was very passionate about PalmSprings.com. I believed that was the brand for Palm Springs, and at the time, I was pretty much universally told I was nuts. But once I convinced myself, you couldn't shake me. And like I said, we made a lot of money. And really, I practically died from from being overworked. But we were starting to get invited to these conferences, and I wanted something to brag about. I wanted to say, yeah, I just got the front page making $1 million in advertising, even though it was driving me insane. I didn't want to say like, well, hypothetically, we think these names are worth this. No, I wanted to say, here's the receipts. Here's how much money we're making. We do 1-year contracts. But yeah, so that's the reason. I don't like to get involved. I don't. I'm too emotionally attached to these names, and no matter what you sell a name for, you regret it. You do. Even whiskey, you do. So it's. I'd rather not be part of that equation.
Yeah, that
Like
makes sense.
yeah, sorry. Um, I know people are going to be super obsessed with this question, and it's good to ask it now so that we don't forget. You mentioned kind of how you ended up doing very well in this business, kind of like a combination between spotting good domains and developing when the time was right. And I think many of us can relate, hustling your ass off basically to make stuff happen with Palm Springs and so on. And let's kind of fast forward to the present and like let's assume somebody sends you in a parallel universe with exactly the memories you have now and the domain knowledge you have now, but with no money or with let's say a $5,000 budget to your name, which is what I assume kind of most domain beginners are working with. And you say to yourself, what can I do now in December 2025 to make it in this business? Would you use the $5,000 to buy domains? Would you rather just act as a broker and hustle your way and broker other people's domains? Would you work on development? Would you do something else? What would you, as a beginner with the knowledge you have now, what do you think would be the optimal kind of route to make it in the domain business at this point?
Well, let me say a couple things. When I started working on PalmSprings.com, I was below broke. I had really when I had a business deal that went bad. And I remember I was on a date in Miami Beach, and the girl said, "Well, how bad off are you?" I said, "See that bum on the corner? He's $300,000 richer than I am." I mean, I was below zero. So once I believed via BoynBeach.com that these names were the actual brands, I suddenly got very excited. And when I went to do PalmSprings.com, I was sleeping on the floor, eating canned tuna fish and spring water for 3 months. I had no money. And then it took off. Now, if I was to do it today, what I would do is this, and I actually made this offer to a couple people I'm waiting to hear from down in Miami. There's some young people up there, a lot of energy, a lot of vigor, a lot of vision, and they don't have to be young people. It doesn't matter what age you are, but a lot of vision, a lot of energy. And if I had a vision for a name and I had a business proposal, I would bring it to the owner of one of these big names for sale and say, "Listen, I know this will work. I will develop it. I will do it. We split the profit. We sell the name for more than this much money. I get half of that. Half of that." I would make that offer, and some of them, if you convince them of your business model, it'll work. So what happens is you're making money off the site. When the name sells or cashes out, you get half of it above a certain amount. There'll be a baseline the owner want to keep that you have to negotiate. If it's too ridiculous, don't do the deal. But there's ways to get creative out there. It's like all of us who got in the 90s, we got the real estate. Now, there's some guys here who've gotten other TLDs that have done really well, like .ai and .io, and have done very, very well. But as far as the public's concerned, I'm a .com guy because the public just doesn't care. They don't. They only want it. They just don't care. They go to .com. You tell them what it is, and to me, that's where branding is. But to answer your question, that is what I would do in 2026. I would, and it was a guy who had a great idea, but he had a horrible domain name. And this guy's idea was brilliant. He was brilliant. He's kind of shy. He's like, "I talk to you," and I'm like, "Oh man!" I said, "Look at our names, and if you see one that you feel passionate about with that model, you tell me." And so he took my number. He goes, "I need a while to think about this," and I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll make it worth your while, and we'll do a test run. And if it takes off, we're off to the races." So you just got to get creative. I mean, you just got to create creative. There's a lot of big brands out there sitting there for a long time. Even if we try to sell all our names right now, we couldn't do it. Finding an end user takes a long, long time. And you can make a lot more money like Rick Schwartz did with Candy.com. He got a piece of that. So, and with his new sale, with his new deal, I can't think of the name of the. It's AI something. I can't think of the name of his domain.
AIreviews.com.
Yeah, he had the yacht party, and he was telling me about it, and I couldn't remember. But so that's it's you've got to get creative. Um, as far as getting into domains as a domainer and flipping names, that's a whole other market. I mean, there's a within, and this is what I'm excited about. I'm not a big believer in non.com with the public. That doesn't mean you can't make a fortune. Within the domain startup world, you can, with these utilities, you can make a lot of money if you really know the market. And that's what's excited me. There wasn't this market like this 10 years ago. You know that, right? This didn't exist. Back then, you sold only .com, and you sold it, either you gave it away for wholesale, you waited forever for an end user. No middle ground. So, and now that's not the way it is. There's people selling .ai, .io, .xyz. I saw .now got a sale. I mean, I see all these TLDs selling, and within the bubble we have now, and some are going to startups. And so there's different ways to make money. But it really comes down to somebody's ingenuity. When I made the money I did for with PalmSprings.com, I want to stress that didn't exist. Nobody was doing that. I was the first one to do that. I had to create my own reality. And that's the beauty of our business. You can create your own reality. And if like they say, raise your flag up. Enough people salute it, you're gonna make a lot of money. But it's I created my own reality. There was nothing back when I started. You got a couple pennies per click. I'm like, who wants to do that? So I treated it like traditional advertising. You paid a set fee for a year for a 120 by 90 pixel ad, because I told everybody I owned the brand for Palm Springs, and when their friends made money, they jumped on. After the 6 months, I no longer had to solicit advertising. They were just calling me. But it got really crazy, and not in a good way. It just, sometimes too much of something can be too much. But going back to your question, it depends how creative you are. If somebody's starting now with $5,000, yeah, you have to assess what your strengths are.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned AI, since this is going to be something that we definitely need to cover, and people are going to want your opinion on this. From the perspective of someone who, let's leave the $5,000 budget aside, even if it's larger, from the perspective of someone who's interested in domaining right now, 2025 realities, what's your take on .ai at this point at current prices? Are you like, yeah, these are good domains, but they're kind of difficult to find the bargain in this market, which kind of tends to be my read on the situation right now? Do you think it's just the beginning, and that in hindsight these prices are going to seem like bargains? Kind of, what's your perception on kind of the state of AI right now, and whether you'd consider it a viable path for people who want to take domaining more seriously?
First of all, what's happened with .ai is just incredible. I mean, I'm speechless. Other extensions have tried to do this. Okay, .io's done, .io's done well. .xyz has had sales. I'm seeing other ones, but what .ai has done, where it's like 25 to 30% of that island's revenue, is just. I mean, they didn't just surf a wave; they surfed a tsunami. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible, and what also played in their favor, besides the AI taking off with the public, is that um, it's the startups realized they didn't need a .com. This is why you're seeing a lot of the startups not using .com. They realize we don't need .com. In fact, some of them are using words we wouldn't register with dashes in them, because it doesn't really matter at this point. They just have to have a great idea, attract the investors, get the funding, and then they're off to the races. Now, here's my prediction. I love .ai, but I feel it has an expiration date, and I'll tell you why. Because now our focus turns to my favorite audience, the public. Okay. Right now, .ai is cool because AI itself is cutting edge, is cool. When it gets to the point that everybody has artificial intelligence, I mean, right now, if you say I'm .ai, they go, oh, cool, what is that? In the future, if you say, my company is AI, they're just going to shrug and be like, well, everybody is. What's the big deal? So that's where I think we're pretty much at the high water mark for sales, maybe going for 3 more months. I think as some of these startups start to switch to the public for revenue, you're entering a different market. The public does not like the right side of the dot. When it comes to brand recognition, they can't stand it. They just it is what it is, and people who don't believe it are going to find it out. In certain countries, your CCTLD can do well, like .de does great in Germany, .fr does great in France, but pretty much it's .com. The other thing with .ai that no one's talking about is in most of Europe and a lot of South America, it's not known as AI, it's known as IA. Look it up. And we're talking a lot of people. So I feel it's going to find its own niche regardless. .ai is not going away. Okay, it's here. It's got its own separate. It's got its own pie. It's got its own slice of the pie, and I think it's fantastic. But when people start talking about it's going to pass .com or compete with .com, they're blowing smoke. Not going to happen. Not with the public. As these companies start switching over, like everybody says, look at Perplexity.ai. It's a great site. They're using .ai. Well, they own the .com. So if you put in .com, it doesn't matter. It flips to the .aa, so they're protected. It's not like they're sitting on the .aa by themselves and go, well, the public will remember our brand. And that's the other thing. People are saying it won't matter what your domain name is because AI will find you. That's a bunch of bunk. They said that when search came out. They said that when apps came out, and that wasn't true. I remember when apps came out. Well, pretty soon domain names won't matter. Just go to your app. Did that happen? No. Do people use apps? Yes. AI is not going to replace domain names because that's your brand, that's your address. That is the only way to keep your individuality as a business or person, and that is not going away. And I think GoDaddy may be further ahead of the curve on this than I give them credit for after launching domainnames.com because they're realizing the public. I mean, you have to realize the first domain name, Symbolics, came out 40 years ago. This industry is 40 years old. And it's gotten to the point where we have to leave the bubble and like I said, be on the same list of do you invest in crypto, domain names, real estate, collectibles. Domain names should be on an equal level with those other investments. And I think that's what's going to happen. But right now, with .ai, it's incredible. I wish I got in on it. I've been too busy doing other things, but I see guys just having killer sales. Just killer .ai sales right now. But I do feel have reached, or will be reaching the high water mark.
You mentioned crypto, and Brady and I always mention on this show how kind of ridiculous it is, and how I guess we should be grateful that the domain industry is still super super small. Like we calculated that at the current Bitcoin price, the daily volume in terms of reported domain sales is something like 5 Bitcoin a day. Now, of course, there are many more unreported domain sales than reported. But what's kind of your take on this? Obviously, other things are a lot hotter when it comes to the investment preferences of the general public. So leaving the business use case aside, just for investment, people are into tech stocks right now. Maybe crypto is on and off. It's going to make a comeback. Maybe it isn't, and stuff like that. Domaining is definitely not in the spotlight. Can you envision kind of a future where that also happens? And if so, what would that future look like when kind of like the animal spirits of investors worldwide start to actually look at domain names as something kind of at parity with crypto, with tech stocks, and whatnot, something that's actually taken seriously in this, I don't know, sea of $1 quadrillion in global assets? Do you think that's likely, and how would you envision kind of a scenario like that?
It's not only likely, it's 100% going to happen. Domain names are probably the best investment out there. If you know what Bitcoin's worth right now, let's say you bought it and you know what it would take you to just double your investment. If you double your investment on a domain name, nobody even gives you a second look. This is how jaded we've become in our industry. This is how much we take for granted the value of these names that the public knows nothing about. Once the public finds out, and the only megaphone that can do it is GoDaddy, and I got to tip my hat to them. There is no way around it. The only megaphone that can educate the public right now is GoDaddy. There's going to be no turning back. Any name you sell now, you'll be slapping yourself on the forehead going, oh my God, I had no idea. Once the public realizes these are your digital addresses, and we live in a digital world, and they can make or break you. Look at kit.com, K-I-T. I saw that sale. If anybody finds what the owner said, how much it affected his business, and he had a pre-existing business, that should be front page news in the investment world, and it's not. It totally turned his business around by having a great, instantly memorable domain name, .com, instantly memorable. I would watch the Super Bowl. And I remember, what was it, 3 years ago? I see all these other TLDs up there, like halfonly.com, and look, .com's falling. Well, the last one that went up, I think like every ad except one was .com. One or two was, one was .org, or two were .org. Once the public realizes the value in these names, they're going to skyrocket beyond anything we know right now. I mean, people telling you how much money they make in crypto, unless you got it on the ground level, then you made a fortune. But let's talk right now. You're investing in crypto right now. You're investing in real estate right now. You want to buy a house. You buy a house right now. If you flip that house for double in 2 years, people are going to be like, "Oh my God, you're incredible! You're an incredible real estate investor. You double your money with domain names. Nobody cares." So this power that we're sitting on that the world needs to know about. And like I said, it's 40 years old. It's ready. It's ready to. It's about time to put its big boy pants on. And the only people that can do it, I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is GoDaddy. And now they're going to do it. So yes, it's going to get to that point, and it's going to supersede. We're gonna think of this period in time as before and after. Names you think you know what they're worth right now, you have no idea in 5 years what they're going to be worth. Crazy money. Crazy money. Because once you bring the public in, it's like all bets are off. I mean, right now we at least deal with a rational market. We can kind of look at each other and go, "Well, you probably pay this or that." When you're dealing with the public, it gets crazy. It's like seeing an art painting. Why did that sell for that? Because somebody thought that was worth, but you're dealing with the public. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. It's gonna. Uh, just look at the stats right now of sales. Just look at go to Ron Jackson's year to date. Look at those names. Some of them were recently purchased, some of them and then flipped, and some were bought a long while time ago. But just if you find the history of each name, you're seeing an incredible profit margin.
David, you also, forgive me if you guys talked about this, but I mean, you mentioned that if you were going to make it in 2026 in domains, that you would focus on high-end names and crafting a business around them with the investor, since presumably you're not going to pick up too many oneword.coms at auction these days. But you, I found it very funny when you recounted going door to door to develop palmsprings.com. You know, today's class of domainers think that they are slogging through outbound, you know, crafting a bunch of emails with ChatGPT and generating a list of leads with Clay or one of these other CRM tools. But you were really doing the hard work of walking around door to door. I mean, that's OG outbounding there. I'm curious, like when you frame that advice, how do you take into account vibe coding and the accessibility of building applications these days? Is that something that you played around with or that you encourage or keep tabs on?
No, that's not my talent, but a lot of people do have that talent. And if they use that talent to create a business proposal, it's what I did. I did what I did because one, I realized early on that the industry was being controlled by webmasters, and they knew nothing about sales and marketing. They were giving these business owners would hear these young guys talk these words they didn't understand, and just do whatever they said. That's why you see these businesses with these crappy domain names, because these webmasters didn't feel the name mattered. So I saw that as a tremendous opening. I also went door to door because I wanted to talk to the public. Believe me, nobody likes going door to door, especially me. But I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to get out there and see how are they understanding this new medium? What does it mean to them? And that gave me a wealth of knowledge and understanding. I understood right away that less is more. Less is more. If your page doesn't sell in 8 seconds, they ping pong out of there. Whereas webmasters believed that more was better. The more content they did, the more that works against you in selling. After 8 seconds, it just the needle just drops. So yes, today, what you're talking about with coding and everything, there are people like the guy I met down in NamesCon who's very good at this. And I looked into his idea and I go, that is brilliant. I can't see how they can't make money, but his domain name was was crap. And he was really nervous about it. I said, no, no, no. I never do a deal unless both parties are like, let's do this. That's how you do a deal. Everybody's got to be happy. Why bother? But yeah, that's what I would do today. But it depends. It depends what your if you're $5,000, you just want to flip names. You got to really study the non.com TLDs because there's a lot of gold in those hills. But you got to know what you're doing. It can go hot for a couple of weeks and go cold, but if you just catch the wave right, and there seems to be about 5 or 6 guys I'll see on X that consistently nail it. And I look at this and I go, wow, that's fantastic. They've studied this, they've got it down, they've studied popular words, they've studied other ways, and they look at the SLD. So it's really, we're still in the Wild West with domains. That's what's freaky. We're 40 years in and we're still in the Wild West, only because the public is pretty clueless about us. They look at us as like this weird unicorn. Like gold.com sold for 5 million. Who would pay that? Of course you would if you're dealing in, how much money you can make, how much money they're going to make now with that brand. You don't search for gold.com. You don't ask AI about gold.com. Once you hear the brand, you're there. So, it's really as the way it's always been in business, regardless of your age. I know people have actually started late, started early, and they've all done well. It really comes down to your creativity, and uh, like I said, I was very impressed at NamesCon because I saw a lot of people I knew from before. I met a lot of new people, and I was just thinking, this is the most exciting industry that we're in. It's the public's got to be letting known about it. So then I saw GoDaddy's booth, and I made a beeline, and I talked to Adam and Jay. I talked to James, and I talked to a bunch of people there, and uh, I was excited. But I wrote the article that I wrote after NamesCon because at this point I went, okay, I've got to take a stand on this hill. GoDaddy controls the whole industry right now, and they're suppressing it, and the public isn't going near us because it just seems too weird. So, but like I said, they've contacted me a couple times to let me in where they're progressing. As they said just yesterday, we'll be evaluating up to mid 7 figures. Wow, that blew me away. Adam doesn't go above.
David,
Adam just stopped.
I am curious, we talk about sort of the evolution of monetization of domains. Obviously, you started monetizing these geos and having this web directory. I would imagine parking was a big part of your business, and now that's
No,
dried up.
Michael would.
No?
Michael wouldn't park. I did it once. We made 5,000 a month. It wasn't worth it. No, we only parked a couple of times. We tried it over the years. Maybe it's changed. I hear people making a fortune, but these are people with gigantic portfolios. I mean, we don't own more than 300 names. We don't have a big portfolio, but some of those names are worth a lot of money. Um, but no, we never did the parking. But we had friends who did. But now Google's kind of put the kibosh on that. Um, which is a shame because some of these names with direct navigation, it was really good traffic. Um,
Yeah.
you
Do
know,
you, okay, that's good to know. Do most of your sales come through GoDaddy? Do you list on Atom or some of these other marketplaces as well? Or contract other brokers?
I have two on Atom right now. I've got tgif.com and I've got eel. Um, I had some names on Spaceship, but I pulled them because I wanted to, and I love Spaceship, by the way. God, I love that site. I wanted to get in bed with GoDaddy on domainnames.com. I knew I had more leverage if I was in bed with them instead of just pressing my nose against the glass and criticizing them. And they accepted these names. All 7. Boom. I mean, what do I have with them? I've got bootleg.com, caution.com, golfclub.com, islanders.com, manicure.com, stew.com, and wednesday.com. These are all good names.
Are those exclusive agreements?
Yeah, and it's a hard contract too. It's something I wouldn't normally sign, but I know that by getting in with them, it gave me more leverage to deal with them because now their business is my business. If you look up one of these names on the GoDaddy free appraisal, it'll show their dopey $19,000-$20,000 price, and below it'll show our price, which is ridiculous, which is totally killing every sale. So it's like I said, we're getting all these inquiries, and then maybe they see the GoDaddy appraisal and they think, oh, well, maybe that's close to what it's really selling for. I don't know what they're thinking, but like I said, the red flag is no offers, none. On our site, when we had them on our own landing pages, we got less inquiries, but we always got one out of every 2 threw an offer at us. It was usually dopey and low, but it was an offer, and some of those did end in sales. But that's where I know the appraisal is killing it right now, and domainnames.com just launched in October 15th. So it's like what, it's not even 2 months old. So it's got a great future ahead of it. And when GoDaddy change the appraisal, they're going to see the sales start to convert, the inquiries start to convert, and then it's just going to blossom from there. So uh, I am, I've been in this business since the mid 90s, and this is the most exciting period for me because now uh, the public's going to finally get involved, and nobody listening right now knows how much reality is going to change. You're going to talk about before and after.
And speaking of the public's involvement, I want to ask you something a bit different. You mentioned you're super bullish on the perspective of domains being more and more important for investors worldwide. What do you think that GoDaddy, as the behemoth that it is, can do to help facilitate that? Because I feel that the main drawback now for domains, from the perspective of the average non-domainer investor, is the fact that it's quite difficult. You know, what domain to choose, where to sell it, how to price it, and so on, in stark contrast to all of these things that are commoditized. Like, if I give you one Bitcoin and that's mine, and you give me one Bitcoin that's yours, no value is lost. We just traded equal value. And the same way you can give me one Apple stock and I'm going to give you one of mine, once again, we're just as good off. Do you think that for domains to become a bigger slice of the global asset pie than they are now, the future is commoditization, and the closest thing we have now is maybe short domains like three-letter.coms and four-letter.coms and three-number.coms, so that direction? Or on the contrary, more of a play on the uniqueness of domains, on them being one-of-a-kind assets, and just doubling down on educating the public and helping them kind of make sense of something that they currently consider to be too complicated? What's your kind of take on what GoDaddy could do
Well,
to
the
further? Yeah.
appraisal system is the one thing. People have no idea what a name's worth. It would be like you trying to sell a car, and you pretty much know a ballpark. You might get three different appraisals for if you're trying to sell a car right now. But could you imagine if you try to sell a car and they would never appraise it for more than 15,000, even if the car is worth 45? Nobody trusts anything. Everybody's confused. So what's going to happen now is the door is going to be blown open. The truth will come out. We're basically talking about truth here, the truth and what these names are worth. Now, my methodology, and my brother is the same way about what a name is worth, it's actually fairly simple. Take that word, and if it's more than one word, put it in quotation marks and do a search on Google. Now, Google hides that results. You'll go under tools and it'll show you how many search results, and that will give me an idea how popular that word or phrase is with the public. I learned a long time ago that popularity equals value. Absolutely, 100%. Now, in some cases, you're making up a new word, and that's different. It's funny. I forget his name. He posted on here that good that GoDaddy's appraisal for ChatGPT.com. It says less than $100. Now, we all know because it's being used, it's probably worth 100 million for all we know right now. So with new words, it's different, and that's another problem with GoDaddy's appraisal system. They're basing on prior sales. You can't do that. Certain words and names become popular, quickly, where they had no popularity before, so there was no pre-existing comparable sales before. So you can't do that. If you go and take any name, one word, and I don't care about the extension, and you go on Saw or Adam, do an appraisal, look at both of those numbers, and do the same appraisal on GoDaddy, and you'll see the problem and how massive the problem is. So the public is thoroughly confused, because when I finally realized that it wasn't that when I finally realized GoDaddy is basically the only company representing domain names that the public trusts. So whatever they tell the public, they're going to go with. So when GoDaddy changes and we have a wide spectrum from $100 to 10 million and all these names in between, um, and people can see honest appraisals or fair appraisals, things are going to change very, very quickly. We suddenly become a real industry and not just something that's limited to a small bubble. And so that's really that's really all it's going to take to trigger it.
Oh, okay. And to kind of double down on that, um, if you had to choose kind of a path for domaining, would it be a path of commoditization, anything from short domains that are kind of commoditized as they are to index funds and maybe domain people who don't know much about domains investing in the industry by kind of grabbing a piece of an index fund that includes domains of the caliber that you guys have? So that's one approach, commoditization, or another approach, helping more regular average Joe people do what current professional investors do by just having GoDaddy double, triple, and quadruple down on education. Of those two, kind of which route would you think would be optimal, and I guess why?
Well, once GoDaddy puts out real appraisals, it's going to attract different people to our business. It's going to attract a vast number of people who do not take us seriously right now. Let me give you an example. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of John Ferber. He's been in the business. He's had some monster sales. And I was at a 4th of July party for him. This had to be about 2019 when he was living in Manalapan, just north of Boynton Beach in South Florida. And I'm sitting next to a guy and we're talking about domain names and we're drinking some beer and we're talking. So when I bought this house, my mother developed terminal cancer. Bree was pregnant. I'm like, God, I can't live in this. I had this 2-bedroom condo in West Palm Beach. I'm like, I gotta get a place. So I found this house, 4 bedrooms on the beach, gorgeous. I said, let me go to Chase and get a loan. And they wouldn't. They did not treat our names as assets. It was worth nothing. And then I see the head guy is the guy I was sitting next to at the party. So I called him. I said, remember me? I'm David at John Ferber's party. He goes, oh my God, how you doing? I said, I'm asking for a simple little loan to buy this beachfront property, and you guys won't recognize our names? And he goes, listen, I know what your domain names are worth, but financial institutions don't respect it as far as collateral. I mean, this is bogus. This is ridiculous. This is how confusing it is out there. So this all has to be changed. This all has to be changed, and it just comes to do with fair market value, with a real market, real appraisals, and bringing in the big boys, the people that really believe in this. And doesn't change the spectrum. People will still buy names for $1,000. People will still buy names for 1.5 million. It doesn't matter. You're still going to have that wide spectrum. So once this is done, and as soon as GoDaddy changes its appraisal system, you instantly start re-educating the public about value. It's going to start.
David, I'm
It's
curious.
going to start attracting people who had no, um, who had no idea about what these names are worth.
David, have you been approached by domain funds or Rally Road to fractionalize these domains? Like, what's your experience been with outside capital coming to you?
It's yeah, kind of. They poke around. It's something that I'm not. I'd have to know more about it. I mean, it's an idea people have, but to me, all right. Let me put it to you this way: I like the concept, but I'm not touching anything until the GoDaddy system appraisal is changed and the public knows the real values of these names. And the public is because that's the only person they listen to is GoDaddy. Some big boys trust certain brokers. We know that, but we're talking about the general public, the gazillion people, when they really can see the fair market value for all these names. Then I would be more open to different ideas. Any idea I'm handed to right now is based on our current situation, and that it's not acceptable to me.
So, so if someone came to you right now and said exactly what you posited earlier for a starter domainer to do, which is here, I'm gonna build an app on this domain of yours. We're gonna go in. We're gonna split some of the proceeds. Is that a kind of arrangement that you would be interested in? Have you taken equity for domains in the past? Like, walk me through kind of the spectrum of options that you have for more esoteric domain transactions.
I haven't. There's one name that Michael and I don't share. It was a personal name that he and his wife have called daycare.com, and he's just done that deal. If you look at the new daycare site, it looks great. He's doing what you're talking about. Um, as far as with our names, God, it would really depend. I'd have to be impressed with the business concept. It'd have to make sense to me. It has to make sense to me how it would generate revenue. We're open to anything, but it's got to be like, a lot of people come to us and the ideas are just so pie in the sky. And when I talk about how I went door to door, that was reality. Okay, people would say, "Oh my God, you're driving a great car and you're making all this money and you do." I said, "Yeah, you know how much work I put into that? You think the universe just handed it to me?" The only thing I knew the whole time through all that pain and suffering was that the brand PalmSprings.com had my back. I always believed that. Yeah. So wait, hold on one second. Let me hand one thing here. Um, no, okay, I got it. So it's it would depend on a lot of factors, but like I said, a lot of people that come to us, the ideas are just so pie in the sky. I mean, what I'm thinking is once we know fair market value for all names and the general public knows it, it's going to attract more established companies. But as far as someone young with an idea, it'd have to be like the idea I heard. I don't want to discuss it. The idea I heard in Miami, I thought was excellent. I could see how people with the right brand would come on and buy, and it would convert to revenue.
What about LTOs? Are you fond of those? Are you wary? What kind of terms do you offer your buyers?
We haven't really done any LTOs. Um, we did one, but it was only over all the breakdown was only 5 periods, and that was for LagunaBeach.com. That was a good sale. We did that. Um, we did have an LTO for Traveler, and it was using crypto for vacations. And God, I'm glad that sale fell through because that was a 7-figure sale. It was way too low. They went about 6 figures in, and then the partners broke up. So we made some money off it. Yes, we've done. Yeah, we've done 2 LTOs.
That's curious. Why are you so against LTOs, or is that not really that's not your stance, but that's just how it shakes out?
Yeah, that's just how it shakes up. I'm not against them. I'm not against them. I do believe there needs to be a substantial deposit on the front end. Because what they're doing is they're locking that name down, and we have some big names. And here's the thing I did learn: when you have a big sale, like when we sold Seasons.com, they're like rogue waves. They like come out of nowhere. It's really the most frustrating part of the business. The name could just be sitting there. You're getting all these dopey inquiries, these ridiculous offers, and then bang, a 50-foot tsunami hits your house, and they really come out of nowhere. Well, that's taken away once you lock into an LTO. But if the terms are good enough and the price is high enough, um, yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely consider it. I'm not certainly not against them.
Interesting. What about I mean, we talk about domain capital on this show sometimes and how they're one of the only lenders in the space. Have you guys, it sounds like you guys have had no issues with cash flow, especially early on in the business, and you don't have high carrying costs because you have so few domains, but has, taking credit against your domains ever been on the table? Is that something you looked at?
Yeah, we've looked at it. I mean, we've looked at it. I mean, it's just like we made a lot of money with the geos, but I really got burned out. And even though that was a while ago, I'm still burned. I'm still burned out. And I just want to. I was focusing more on working with the best brokers, getting the best names, and then when I really took a hard look at the market, which was great, because I came back with fresh eyes, I immediately saw what GoDaddy was doing, and I was appalled. And the more I researched, the worse the picture got. I mean, I realized this was massive. This was just a massive suppression. Because I would talk to people in the area here, and they invest. Most people here are retired entrepreneurs, and they invest a lot. And domain names to them, they're fascinated by it, but they would never. It's like a unicorn. They know it's beautiful, but it's unpredictable, and it shouldn't be that way. Not after 40 years. Not to 40 years. So if they had a source they trusted and they could see the value across a wide spectrum, like I said, like from $100 name to a $10 million name, and then they would trust it. They would trust it to wheel and deal and get in there.
Right. What are your, I mean, we talked about .ai. What are your thoughts on the upcoming GTLD round? Just the other day, Unstoppable announced that we will be going to the ICANN auction for .agent, among many other TLDs. And we have some partners that are going with us there. Do you see threats on the horizon for existing, .coms, .ai, and the other top TLDs? Are you worried about that? Are you guys paying attention? And
Yes, I
what are
am.
your views?
I wish there was 10,000 TLDs. And let me tell you why. When they first hit, yeah, there was panic because there was uncertainty. We sold rate.com in 2016 and got a decent price, but we could sell it for 10 times more now. The reason it sold back then is because the TLDs were just starting to really kind of get some traction in the industry, though, which is kind of blinding because the public's, you can't take your eyes off the public. And I was actually in the band then. I was doing a show in London that night. I was doing a concert. And I was backstage. And I told Michael, do we really want to leave this much money on the table? We don't know what's going to happen with these new GTLDs. So we took the sale. This is July 2016. I'll never forget. And what we later found out was they didn't weaken .com. It made .com stronger because the more TLDs you've got, the more you're expecting people to remember the right side of the dot. And in marketing, I'm sorry, but in branding and online marketing, that's the kiss of death. .com is basically invisible. It puts all the weight on the left side of the dot. That is exactly where its value comes from. If I tell you we own Wednesday, people are going to assume it's Wednesday.com. That's just the way it is. I'll talk to anybody around who is an investor. That's the first thing they're going to assume. So if you're now expecting them to remember a gazillion names, it just makes .com worth more. Now the good news for those TLDs is you now have a real sub market for GTLDs that are. I mean, besides .ai, .io, like I said, .xyz, you got .news. I saw some other names. I always see the new sales on X. So this wasn't happening before. See, and this market's only going to get bigger. So yes, there's a lot of investment opportunities in those names. Um, as far as public, you know, as far as public application and public acceptance, good luck because they're I've dealt with them. I mean, that's where the money is, but it's very simplistic the way they think, and you expect them to remember both sides of the dots with branding. It's not going to help your cause, and that's only going to throw .com higher in value. But on the sub market, a lot of new domainers are going to make a lot of new money. You guys are getting .agent. Is that what you said?
We're applying for it, yes. Among others, including .brave with Brave Browser as a partner. Let's see, .anime, .hub, I believe, and some others.
Oh, those are all great. Those are great. Love them.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all ships there.
Yep.
It certainly excites new partners in the ecosystem, not only from a business development perspective with new registry stakeholders who are promoting the value of domains and reaching a broader audience of people who might want to buy domains and invest in them, but also attracting the interest of investors themselves. It can feel difficult for a beginner to barge into the domains industry because so many of the quality real estate has been gobbled up decades ago. And it feels like a lot of people are fighting over scraps in ultra competitive domain auctions now. But, if there's new untapped real estate, I think that gives a lot of hope for new entrants who think they can strike a deal. Unfortunately for them, they don't realize that a lot of these new registries will implement premium pricing, which is a death knell to domainers. As the registries steal that margin for themselves. But yeah, it's certainly positive and brings a lot of energy and attention onto the ecosystem, which is obviously positive.
Yeah, they shouldn't do that to domainers because domainers give these new TLDs life. Yeah, they should not. They're going to learn a hard lesson. If they expect the public's going to be like, "That's great, we should get that," well, guess again. I see those numbers all the time. I watch the stats all the time. I mean, for every .ai, I can tell you 500 more that just fell by the wayside. So they shouldn't do that. You want domainers to get involved. You want domainers to wheel and deal these new TLDs. That's the lifeblood. Um, yeah, I would be. They should be real careful on registration fees. I would keep them down as far as they can, and get the domain submarket all over them.
Yeah.
And speaking of the manner in which domain investors are treated, now this is something that doesn't affect you because you own 300 super quality.coms, and so the renewal fee as a percentage of the value of the domain is basically zero in your case. But I'm thinking now about big players like huge domains with millions of domains, or smaller players like Mike Mann or Matthew Klein with some hundreds of thousands of domains. You mentioned GoDaddy, but what about another big player? What about VeriSign and the grip they have on .coms? Like, for example, next year they're going to hike prices again. And in front of me right now, I have a public comment on ICANN's website by Matthew Klein, who owns a couple 100,000 domains, and his comment was against VeriSign being allowed to renew its contract for .com, saying that the increases don't make sense. And for people like that, for domain investors like that, who in aggregate account for millions upon millions of domains due to the scale at which they operate, obviously these hikes can make the difference between eventually profitability and the business no longer being worth it. What's your take on VeriSign? What's your take on these price increases and kind of your perspective when it comes to the big players in the industry? What's your perception on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I've heard Mike Mann called a small player. So, I mean, you must know guys with. I don't know anybody who owns millions of domain names. That's inconceivable to me. But if they do, they do.
Which
When
domain?
somebody
And
complains,
Rebel.
what's that? Wait, somebody's breaking up here.
Breaking up for me, Andre.
Yes.
You're muted.
Yeah, somebody's breaking up. When somebody
Which
complains
domain?
about
Sorry.
Yeah, when somebody complains about .com raising their prices, I kind of got to laugh because it's still .com is still so cheap to register compared to these new boys on the block, which are just, I mean, look at .ai. I mean, it's
It's like when Elon, started charging for X, and then everyone was complaining, and he was like, "Shut up and give me my $8 a month." I mean, it is unbelievably cheap.
it is.
Like for the value that you get from a .com, what you pay for it, and it is obviously that's subject to tight scrutiny and regulation, and it's more or less a utility that's highly regulated by the government. But I mean, we would have such a healthier domains market if it wasn't so heavily regulated. If VeriSign were able to apply premium pricing to .com domains
Oh,
and actually charge what those domains were
we'd
worth,
be dead.
you would see much stiffer competition among and migration away from .com onto other TLDs. And in general, like the entire industry would be much healthier. You would have, registrars more able to compete because they're less reliant on this single like player who's dictating the entire profitability and their costs of their business. I think it's one of these situations where the regulations seem like they're supposed to keep the monopoly in check, but in fact they only perpetuate that monopoly.
Well, I see what you're saying. I mean, I feel that. I mean, .ai doesn't even have to charge what they're charging. They just want to do that. I mean, the fact it's now 30% of the island's revenue. I mean, they're making money. They don't need to even charge. It's not like saying, "Well, if we don't charge this much, we won't make a profit." That's a bunch of crap. Um, I like .com where it's at. I think .com. I think Icon. These new TLDs, in my opinion, have always been a money grab. Always been a money grab. There wasn't really a necessity for most of them. But to each his own. And the one thing it did do was it did create the subdomainer market, which did not exist. It did not exist before. You're seeing all these new domainers coming up, just flipping these not non.coms like hotcakes, and they're doing great. So in that way, I like it. Um, because before, when it was just either you wholesale.com or you end user.com, that's kind of boring. I mean, even though that's big money, but it's not a real industry now with all these TLDs flipping around. It's exciting, and it's exciting to watch it grow. And it did not exist before, but it's I don't as far as what people should charge. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, some of these TLDs make no sense. They'd probably have to price gouge to make a profit. But like I said, I don't know how many they're adding next year or the year after. But it's I have no problem with. Like I said, I wish there was 10,000 of them. It just makes .com worth more because there's no you can't remember all these TLDs. So it's that's just me speaking as a .com investor. But I was worried in the beginning 10 years ago was going to dilute the market. Nobody knew, and the exact opposite happened.
Yeah. I think if pricing were at the market rate for .coms, you would see much more pressure to get away from .coms as VeriSign would exert that pricing power. But anyways, as we wrap here, David, I'm curious, have you been paying attention to Unstoppable? What do you think of the landscape of registrars and what's been happening over the past couple of years?
I think it's great. And I like it a lot. I just want to have a real accurate appraised market. Once that happens, everybody's going to benefit from it. Nobody is not going to benefit from it. I actually had one guy to tell me, "Well, it helped me get some really cheap names at an auction." I'm like, "Get the hell out of here! Come on, that's ridiculous." It's once there's respect added to our industry because we have fair market value, it's going to help everyone. Anyone who has anything to do with domain names. And yes, I do like what I'm seeing going on. I do like all the new players coming in. It just shows how much the market's grown, but it's really at the point where it's like a chrysalis ready to burst out to be a butterfly. It's really going through that explosion part right now because it's been hemmed in for too long. We've been the world's best kept secret for too long. The public doesn't know anything about us. We're considered kind of like freaks, and it shouldn't be when we're the best investment out there. So anybody who has anything to do with these names on any level, as soon as the megahorn starts speaking fair market value for what these names really are, it's going to change the landscape.
Yeah, well put. Well, David, really appreciate you coming on today. I got a lot of good questions from the audience, including about the new GTLD round. So I think people were very pleased to get the perspective of someone who's been around for such a long time. But it was great to shoot the shit, and yeah, I'm very pleased. Any closing final words of wisdom you'd share with the audience?
Yeah, everybody listening should know this. Domain names are the best investment on the planet, and you're part right now of the world's best kept secret. The reality right now is very tiny compared to where it's going to be a year from now. And just know that you're part of a very historic moment in time.
Yeah, well, very bullish. Love to hear that. I mean, that's certainly played out over the past many decades. You do wonder how long that secret stays well kept, and just what is keeping the lid on this thing. But that's for us to find out. Well, David, much appreciated. It was great to have you on. Just some housekeeping notes, guys. Usually we do this on Fridays, so all my taglines I can't do anymore. But Unstoppable does have 599.com registrations on Fridays. We did have some technical issues last week. Unfortunately, we are just plagued by this third-party provider that continues to flake on us and provide terrible service. So rest assured that the outages that you saw last Friday, were not under our control, and we're working hard to completely migrate off of this provider so that we are not subject to these things in the future. But everything is returned to normal functionality. You should be able to obviously register, transfer, make DNS updates and whatnot. But bear with us as we work out those kinks over the next couple of months. We're shipping some updates to make bulk actions much more stable. We've obviously put out the push functionality update, which makes that a lot smoother, and lots of other good things coming down the pipe. We hope to get to some improvements to the dashboard and provide better filtering for name servers and new columns that tell you aftermarket prices as well as unstoppable prices and how your listings are all configured, so you can see that at a glance all on your dashboard. And so that should make managing your domains a little bit easier as well. We still continue to have our $5.99 transfer deal. That is for people in the Domainer Club. So if you haven't already, apply to be in the Domainer Club, and if you qualify, you can get that price. For everyone else, that price is $7.99 for .coms and similar discounts on other TLDs. And for Domainer Club members, that is 1,800 transfers at $5.99. Like I mentioned previously, we do expect those prices to increase again in the future. So do take advantage while you still can. I think that's everything. But guys, hope you have a great Wednesday. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you, David, for all of the colorful, personable commentary. And we will catch you next week on Unstoppable Live. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Brady.